Hey folks, I want to talk to you about this application Readio. I strongly recommend Readio to help grandparents and parents read to their grandchildren remotely when they can't be in the same room. Whether you're living across the country, across the world, or you're just gone on a business trip, Readio makes it easy for you to read to those young ones when you're away. It's a super easy tool that allows for video monitoring across the top of the screen so they can see you and you can see them, as well as having the book prominently displayed, making it easy for you to read to those young ones, or better yet, having them read to you. What I want you guys to do is go to cool-grandpa.us, look for the affiliate link for Readio, click on that link, and sign up today for your free trial. Welcome in. I'm glad you guys are joining me and Tabasco for a great conversation about being a grandpa. You guys are going to be sure to enjoy all the insights that Tabasco has to share with us about being a grandfather, about supporting the family, and his insights and suggestions for brand new grandpas. So, without further ado, let's dive into the conversation. Hello, and welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. This is your host, Greg Payne, coming at you from Studio 12. This podcast is about being the best possible grandpa you can be, focusing on what it is to be a grandpa and how we can all share that experience together for our grandchildren. Hi, everybody. I'd like to introduce you to Richard Tacasco, who is our guest today on the Cool Grandpa Podcast. Now, Tabasco, as we introduce you, I want to give some background information as far as where Tabasco goes, and then we're going to dive right into the grandpa piece.
So Tabasco starts with Air Force call signs. As you can tell by movies like Top Gun, where you have Ice and Maverick and Goose, every fighter and actually every aircrew member in the Air Force typically has a call sign. So based off my name, Tacasco is a slant of Tabasco. And so, and actually my wife had it first, and then I stole it from her and I started to use it. So everybody thought it was given to me, so I didn't get some other stupid name. So that's where Tabasco comes from.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that, Tabasco, because I know some people would be wondering about if I'm making up a nickname for you or something along those lines. But
No, it was my Air Force, and it stuck with me even when I went into industry, because nobody knew who I was when I started being Rich Tacasco again. But if I said, "Hey, Tabasco," on the phone, they go, "Oh, I know who you are," and it's just stuck with me. And then it's a good conversation piece actually on the industry side.
Oh yeah, I imagine it starts a lot of stories and a lot of swapping about, either people that had served or fathers or mothers that had served, and where everybody was stationed and lived, and all those kinds of conversations.
Absolutely. It's a door opener.
Now, what I'd love to do is take you back to when you first heard the news that you were going to become a grandfather, and give us your reaction on that, because everybody has a little bit of a different reaction to hearing that news when it's, "Hey, Dad, you're going to be a grandpa."
It was actually, to me, it was like starting a new chapter. The reaction was, of course, elated, because having, the legacy of the family go on, and especially being happy for my daughter and my son-in-law, that was just really, really great. So I just really saw it, and I'll tell you, I was pretty pragmatic about it. I really saw it as an opportunity to really do things with another young individual and to share with them. And so I was really super pleased about it. I was looking forward to it greatly.
Oh, that's great news. And like I said, everybody's got these different reactions when I'm talking to grandpas, from your reaction, and even some, which I fall into the category of, I'm way too young for this. And then there's the other spectrum of, boy, I thought those kids would never give me grandkids.
So I was kind of in the middle. What I was really glad about is I was at a place in my life where I could actually do more things with a young individual than I could when I was a parent. Because as a parent, you've got all the demands of life. You're growing your career, you're trying to earn money, you're trying to balance work life, and it is really, really, really difficult. I really do feel for parents because I've learned more as a grandparent of what it takes to be a parent than I did when I was a parent, if you can get my point, because it is hard to be a parent. So I found it really as an opportunity to know that I was at a stage in life where I could really enjoy working with another young individual and watch him grow.
Yeah, and I'm at that point too where I think I can't. I've got a 3-year-old grandson,
Mm-hmm.
and I want him to hurry up and get to 10 years old, so I can start to do maybe a little bit more backyard camping or do some things, because I think a little bit from what I'm hearing is that as you were coming into this role, there was a lot of projecting as far as, hey, I can do this with that young person and I can do this with that, and having a plan of activity laid out.
Well, don't rush it because let me tell you, the 2 to 10 year is a really formidable stage. And they start to take on their personality and you find their interests and you see where the head lies. So Jackson, who is now 5.5, he loves baseball and he really enjoys playing baseball. I took him and for private baseball lessons at the age of 5 plus 1 month. And he was focused. He was, when the instructor said, I've worked with young kids, and this kid wants to play baseball. And so, even though you want to wait to 10 because you think you can do a lot with them, you can really do a lot with them even between the 3 and 10 year old stage because they are so excited. They want to do everything and they do interact real well with you. So I really I love both boys equally, but we've had different experiences with them as they were growing up.
Oh, sure. And, it's interesting talking with different grandfathers too, because what their advice is to me, and because I'm new at this still and I'm trying to figure things out, is really been that get down and play with them. And those early ages, just like you said, right, is
Yep.
it's that early play, it's that early sharing of interests that start to formulate those bonds between grandfather and grandson or grandfather granddaughter.
Yes, absolutely. Eli and I have a very close bond based on he's a soccer player, I'm a soccer player. Soccer is his sport. Plus, we do a lot of things together, riding bikes, things that the little one can't do. When he was growing up, he used to spend a lot of time with us, even though we were distant. We moved into the same quote unquote neighborhood and close by when he was 3 years old. And him and I just used to just have fun together. And then Jackson came along and we had a different bond because he lived with us ever since he was born every day because my daughter worked. So we had an opportunity to grow in a more uh, basically shaping him earlier in life. So, but we find our ways just to have fun, and they want to be here. I mean, we're in a good relationship where they want to be here. So it is really pretty cool to see how you can have that relationship with them. And the big thing I find is do the things that they're interested in doing, and it really makes the relationship stronger. And I can expand upon that later if you want, but that's something that I found being more patient with what their interests are rather than to shape them towards my interests.
Oh, that's great advice, and definitely something that's come across with other grandfathers, especially ones that are close, meaning they live close to the grandsons or granddaughters. Now, how was it when you were first starting to be around Jackson then? pretty regularly, right? Mom would drop him off at your place and you'd start watching him during the day?
Yeah, so the way it works out is, though my daughter lives about 20 minutes away, she teaches in a school that's literally 5 minutes away. So what would happen is every morning, my daughter would drive to school, and I would meet her there. I would get Jackson, put him in the car, bring him to the house, and then she would come pick him up at the end of the day. So probably from the age of 6 months till about 1.5, he was with us 5 days a week. Then it went to 4 days a week. Then it went to three, and then it went to two, and then it went to one. And very sadly, just a month ago, he started kindergarten, and we don't have that little dude hanging around the house, even one day a week, which is kind of sad. It's like empty nesting all over again.
I can imagine. Now, I'm thinking about maybe our grandparents' generation where you didn't find that kind of dynamic as often. I've talked to several grandpas now that do that daily, and I don't know if it's babysitting's the right word or caretaking of the grandsons, but how did that maybe, or did it kind of shape a little bit of the thinking or adjust your thinking about that role of grandfather when you're doing a little bit of that daycare or babysitting?
No, your point's right. In fact, my wife would tell my daughter, listen, I don't want to be the babysitter. I want to be the grandparent. And so we kind of get into the mold by being with them every day, that it's not the special grandpa and grandma are coming to visit. We're going to go do special things. Because when Eli was younger, we lived in Virginia and my daughter lived in North Carolina. So when grandma and grandpa came, right, we went and did special things. We went and had special dinners. We went and had, it was a novelty per se. When you're closer and you're with them every day, it's like being the babysitter, because you're just keeping them entertained, keeping them nurtured, keeping them fed. And you're just basically, and I'll say it, a second parent at that point. So you lose that grandma and grandpa are visiting novelty. And so as a grandparent now, finding different ways to be the grandparent side of the house and not the caregiver side of the house. Sure. So it does become a challenge.
Yeah. And I imagine too that, and I don't know if you guys were intentional about this, but keeping that separation a little bit about the parenting styles and the parenting guidelines about how your daughter wanted to raise, Jackson, and forms of discipline and things of those nature that don't really come into, as you said, when grandma and grandpa come into town, it's a different set of rules. It's a different set of engagement, mostly. But now, you've got your parenting background and you've got your experience raising the daughters, and now you've got Jackson. So there's got to be some, give and take or communication.
Yep, absolutely. And we struggled with this, right? Because we had to understand the way that Lindsay would, my daughter and her husband would control the behavior of their kids and try to meet that style as much as we could, mostly from a standards perspective, maybe not from an approach perspective, because their approach and our approach are going to be different. And, typically grandparents are a little bit more tolerant than parents are. Mm-hmm. And so we had to be careful of not being too loosey-goosey and letting them get away with stuff that they wouldn't get away with at home. So there's a constant communication between my wife and my daughter about, hey, do you let him do this, or do you not let them do this, or are they on restriction? They can't have iPads, or can they have iPads today? And so there's a lot of communication about that. And where my daughter really struggles is her husband's parents are also in the local area. and they get them as well. So these kids have three different households that they have to operate out of, and we try to be consistent as much as possible to what her restrictions are, though we may approach it differently. But we try, and sometimes I have to bite my tongue, right, and go, all right, I'm not the parent. If that's the way they want to do it, okay, I just have to roll with it. So,
Right.
so there's numerous times where you just got to go deep breath. All right, we're going to do it this way. But even though it may not be the way I would have done it. And let me tell you real quick, the way I do it as a grandparent was probably not the way I would have disciplined or mentored or tutored as it was when I was a parent, because I was a lot less patient as a parent than I am as a grandparent.
And I wonder too if the patience in general comes from us having so many miles on us that
Mm-hmm.
we can, as a parent, like you were saying, a lot of us are young in our careers or maybe getting towards the middle of our careers. There's other kids sometimes in the household. There's other pressures. We haven't quite got everything figured out as well as
Yep.
we think we should. And so we can be a little bit more short with the kids sometimes versus now, like I said, with a little bit more mileage on us that we go, it's not a big deal in the big scheme of things.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is looking back as the way we did handle stuff when we were a parent. And I like your mileage term, right? And you go, you know what? I really didn't handle that good as a parent, right? Because of all those pressures that you talked about. So let me try to, in this part of life with our grandchildren, and you don't want your grandchildren not to want to come see you, right? You want them to come see you. But I'll be honest, I didn't handle a lot of things well when I was a parent. But I've reflected on those things. And as a grandparent, I'm trying to still maintain the standards and still respect my daughter's standards. But yet the approach is more of I will say, a grandparent approach. It's more of, hey, I'm more here as your safe zone sometimes than your parent, and that's the way I try to approach it. And that's having that safe zone for the kids. I know I used my grandparents' house even when I was a teenager. Like, I need to go. I need a different environment. I need to go to a safe zone. So I'm going to go to the grandparents because I know that they're going to be a little bit more tolerant. I can relax a little bit. I can let my guard down. And so, I think as a grandparent, we try to provide that safety net for the kids because they are dealing with the parents that are great parents, but they still are in that situation where parents are trying to do everything and it's not easy.
Right. And I think too is, at least I'm finding, thinking about this grandparenting role, and especially grandfather role,
Hmm.
is as much of a let's say of a coach. I mean, we're cheerleaders for the grandkids, but
Yep.
also thinking in terms of a coach and a consultant for the grandkids.
Well, and so very valid point. And I do laugh because and my daughter will probably slap me around, but she's very tolerant of what I do. I do have a habit of, even when the kids are kind of getting in a little bit of trouble in their own house, I kind of pull them off to the side and go, hey, dude, like, you really don't want to do that. You need to really be respectful of your parents. You really. So that coaching, and I'm sure you've heard it from other grandparents, of where you're trying to help the kids survive in their own home, per se, is probably pretty prevalent. And I almost have to watch it because you're not the parent. And as the grandparent, you do want to coach them and give them some hints on survival, but you really do need to be careful not to override the parent. And so it's really a touchy thing. But I do it a lot. I do a lot of coaching on the kids, and sometimes I probably too much. They probably want me to shut up and not even talk anymore. But that's just the way it is.
Yep. Well, and I think too that sometimes we want to jump in. As you were talking about, hey, I could have done things differently as a father. I think it's natural for us to look at those differences and go, oh, here's a moment where, I don't know, if I was dad or if I was a parent, I would be handling the situation this way. Because I find that with myself, with the 3-year-old grandson a little bit, in terms of very much the same thing as, he's in meltdown mode, whatever it is. I can handle that and deal with that a little bit different than I did when I was a parent. And I don't know if it's so much making up for it as just knowing I can do something different now.
Yeah, no, I think it is. It is a definite mental flip when you get on the grandparent side of just, and again, my daughter's going to listen to this, so and it's just, I approach it as a grandparent more from there's a 3-year-old having a meltdown. I need to help them through it versus, there's a 3-year-old having a meltdown. I don't need to deal with this right now. Right. And so, and I think as a grandfather, when you're doing it and your 3-year-old's, going to be like that, you're going to sit back a little bit and be more of that, well, the kid's having a meltdown, we need to, help them through it, versus that other side of, listen, this is crazy. He shouldn't be doing this, or she shouldn't be doing it. We approach it differently, and I guess I'll go back to what you said. It's because we've looked back on ourselves. We do have mileage, and we can understand a little bit more what the kids may be going through to grow than we did when we were helping them grow. So it is an interesting dynamic.
One thing I wanted to talk about too is with both of the kids into sports and youth sports, definitely on the younger side at this point. When you're attending games and when you're there, have you noticed a difference between being at the grandson's games versus being at your daughter's activities in terms of mindset and being present?
Yeah, I've been told. I've been told to keep my mouth shut. So, at my daughter's games, I used to be, very pushy for her on her performance and very vocal. There's some new rules now too when it comes to going to games. And so when Eli was a little bit younger, I kind of got that mode a little bit. And now that Eli, the 10-year-old, is a little bit older, I kind of sit back and watch. And then when I take him to practices, or we're off to the side, or I go practice with him, I kind of give him hints that I think are things that can improve his game. On the little one, we're still in the encouragement stage. So I will say that my parental yearn for my kid to be the best kid on the field is not as demanding as when you're a grandparent and you're just wanting to, kind of like helping them get through the tantrum. You want to help them get through the sport and be more of a mentor than you do want to be the parent that's, really wants the best for them and may vocalize that. Lindsay's really good. Her husband's really good about sitting back and watching the games and then working with the kids on the side, because really you're not allowed to yell anymore like we used to in the old days. And so I will say, to answer your question, it is a little bit different. I have stepped back a lot from when I was in my boisterous days.
Okay. One of the things too that I talked with some of the other grandparents about and was curious with this is being even more present in what's going on the field or something along those lines. Because as we talked about earlier with our kids, I knew I was thinking sometimes about the emails that I need to send out later that night, the meeting coming up tomorrow, some of those pressures. Do you find that you can now just block that stuff and put it aside and just focus on what's going on?
Yeah, more or less. I'm still working full time, so I still got that, but I make it a priority to attend their sporting events. When I grew up, my parents never came to a single game, and my grandparents never came to a single game. Of even when my dad was coaching me in C League, Little League, my grandparents never came anywhere near even being thought of to come watch a game. I had to drop out of baseball, and that was a whole nother story. But even in my high school days, when I was playing high school sports, uh, they never came. And so from that point, I was of the ilk of attending my kids' sporting events. And let me tell you, here in North Carolina, in the Raleigh area, even for 5-year-old baseball, the grandparents in the audience are like more than the number of kids on the field. And it is very encouraging, and they're constantly with the parents encouraging the kids. So it is important to attend those sporting events.
Well, and that's one thing too that I think is a little bit different from our grandparents' generation to the people that are becoming grandparents now is being more active and more involved.
Yep.
And I was on another call today, and I was saying, one, I think partly we're living longer. We have different lifestyles. I mean, I remember at a very young age, my grandfather already having a kind of problems with his hip and a hitch in his step. And just the relationship and the dynamic was a little bit different versus what I'm seeing with grandparents today, where it's much more engaged and involved in the grandkids' lives. You know, and I
Right.
think that's one of the things that we're trying to figure out right now is how do grandparents work this thing out now that we're maybe in better shapes sometimes and living longer and being able to engage more with those grandkids.
Yeah, I still go out and play soccer with the boys, play baseball with the boys. I actually last October broke my ankle because I was playing baseball with the boys. I take them out and we play soccer. We play. Jackson likes to play hockey in the street. And I go out there with them. I don't, and I tell them, hey guys, I can't run or I can't do this, and they're actually more tolerant of me than I am of them sometimes. And I think if I was to, we played sports when we were kids, and we played a lot more sports than I think our grandparents did. And so we know, I know how important sports was in my growth and in my development in my life. And the sports today to bring the boys to is really a place for you to go and watch their accomplishments and encourage them. And when they do good or when they do bad, you're there for them. And it's I think a mindset for me that I played sports. I know how important those sports were to me. I didn't have people on the sidelines when I walked off the field to encourage me and tell me how proud they are of me. So I and my daughter allows us. So whenever Eli or Jackson have a game, they have two sets of grandparents and a set of parents at just about every event. And so, and we encourage them, we cheer them on, we tell them what a great job they do. So I think it's a way of um, kind of influencing their lives because it is a central part of what they do outside of school.
Yeah, well,
And
go ahead.
and so I remember the only events my parents would come to is when I played in the high school band. They would attend band events because they knew and understood music, right? So my parents and I believe my grandparents would occasionally come to our music events because that's what they related to, right? And that's what they would come enjoy. The sporting events they didn't really grow up with. So that wasn't a relationship for them. But with us growing up in sports, I think that builds that tie to where we see that as a focus area, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I wonder too if the boys are even old enough where you guys are comparing, contrasting maybe some of their favorite players to players that you saw growing up and some of your heroes. Because I think sports is one of those, I don't know, maybe people talk about it, but it feels to me like it's an unappreciated link that grandfathers especially can have with grandsons and granddaughters, where we talk about, hey, I did see Hank Aaron one time, not necessarily hit the record-winning home run, but hey, right. I saw this guy. I saw Pete Rose. I saw the Big Red Machine. Let me tell you about these guys. And compare and contrast that to like the modern-day Dodgers or whatever team the grandsons and granddaughters are liking.
Yeah, we don't I think their other grandfather does that a little bit because he's got that relationship with the sports teams and how the sports teams had the players of the past, like for the Mets, the Tom Seavers of the past, and Yogi Berra as a coach and all that other good stuff. I find the kids are very current about who the players are. They don't ask a lot about, hey, how were the Mets back in 1968 when they won the, World Series, or 1972, or whatever it was. So you almost, I think as a grandparent, I have a hard time staying up with them on their knowledge of current ball players versus them trying to understand the past. And so having working full time, having 3 volunteer type organizations, I don't study the ball teams, but I can ask Jackson about any player on the Mets and he'll know about him. Any player on the Panthers, the hockey teams, even at 5 years old, because he hears his dad and his brother talk about it all the time. So I think the opposite is a little bit true of a grandparent, of getting up to speed on what their focus is on for the ball teams rather than them trying to come to the past.
No, that's a good point. And again, it may be also a little bit with their ages, right? They're not quite at that age where they're going to dive into the baseball encyclopedia.
Correct.
Yet.
Correct. Yeah. Nope. So you have to get up to speed where they are, and I'll give you an example, WWE wrestling, right? Even though they don't watch it, there was a time there that they were really into and Jackson will come over and say, hey, Pops, who's your favorite wrestler? Is it who do you really like the best? The only one I know is The Rock. So I'll say The Rock, right? And he'll relate to that. So as a grandparent, you almost have to get current and not live in the past, because these kids are totally immersed in it. They've got Siri. They can go to Siri anytime they want on their, device in their bedroom and say, hey, tell me about this player, and they'll get all the information they want. So it does take a grandparent to stay up to speed versus trying to drag them back into the past.
Oh boy, I've got some work cut out for me then, because
you got some work to do.
I'm still working full time, and a lot of other things going on. But now I'm going to have to be watching my hockey and baseball a little bit closer.
Yep. Yeah, they're gonna run you over. They'll talk about players and they're checking scores every day, and the 5-year-old walk in the house and say, hey, the Dodgers beat the Mets last night 3-2. And he just goes on his Siri and asks her every day what the scores are. And so they are current. They are really current at what the ball players are doing, who they are, who the hockey players are. So you better bone up, because they're coming after you.
Well, there's worse things to throw some of my time at,
There you go.
Before this conversation, I did read up on the military.com interview, I think you did. And you had mentioned on there that listening, becoming a better listener has been an evolved skill.
Yes.
Have you noticed that helping you in that grandfather role?
Yeah, because I didn't do it as a parent. It was always my expectations of my children overrode my listening of what they were trying to tell me. And I didn't learn that until I became a commander in the Air Force and I started to counsel other families and realized that other parents were not listening too because they had expectations of their children and they weren't listening to what their children's expectations were. So that taught me a life lesson that I didn't learn until my kids were teenagers, and I tried to change that behavior. Maybe not doing it very well, but I did. As a grandparent, I try to take that and I do it in industry and I did it later in my life in the Air Force of trying to listen before judging, trying to listen before reacting. And so as a grandparent, I found I try to be a better listener and understand where the kids are coming from versus trying to tell them what they're supposed to be rather than what they are. You do try to mold them when you're a parent, right? You do try to give them those ethics and standards and ways of how you should be as a citizen. But listening is very critical to really trying to understand what your grandkids are going through. And and I'm not saying life is bad for them, right? But just like you and your kid, you're going to have your struggles. Life is usually pretty good, and you want to listen to the good things as well as you want to listen to the things that aren't going so well.
Now, what are some of the tips that or what are some of the things that you started to do to become a better listener? And it sounds strange because at the surface, listening is hearing, but listening is deeper than that.
What I found that I had to do was stop talking, not trying to answer to every sentence, to kind of sit back and let the conversation go on the other side before I stepped in to make a comment. And I mentor a lot of folks. And one of the things I tell them in our mentoring relationship, if you just want me to shut up and listen, you tell me to shut up and listen, and I won't say anything. If you don't tell me to shut up and listen, you're going to get an opinion, okay? Because that's the way I am. I'm a type A. But I used to be, every sentence I would try to respond to. And my mind was calculating constantly, what am I going to say to this? So rather than listening to the next sentence, I'm trying to formulate in my head what I'm going to say to the first sentence, right? So I'm losing the message of the second and third and fourth sentence because I'm still trying to answer the first sentence. So I found by sitting back, shutting your mouth, don't try to make a comment until you receive all the information. Then if the person wants a response, then give the person a response. So it was a change of behavior of not trying to be the know-it-all and be able to respond to everything that's said. And that's helped me listen. I won't say I do it 100%, but I've really got to force myself sometimes to not make a comment and just wait until a comment is ready for. And it's something that I had to change in my behavior. If that makes sense to you.
No, it does, because I think sometimes when we're in that parent role and maybe even the grandparent role, we're anticipating where the kids are going with the conversation, the story, the feelings, whatever that may be. And, that may be, let's say, the surface issue that they're going through.
Yep.
But I find, and it sounds like you're talking about this, if you keep your mouth shut and listen and let them go through this, there's probably some things that are even higher of importance that they're trying to express.
Right. And the other thing is, I've learned throughout a lot of military interactions, and whether good or bad, is not listening for the surface message, but listening for the underlying message. Though something may be coming out in one way, because that's how they can express it, there could be another underlying reason that isn't coming out by their verbalization. And you don't want to drill them and make them feel like they're under an inquisition, but what's really bothering you, right? I find that in adults, and I find that in children as well. And the other thing I think we do is we've been there, done that. So when they start talking about something, especially if they're kind of stretching the story a little bit, and you go, is that really what you did, or is that really what's going on? You're trying to say, I've been there, done that. You can't fool me because I've done that. But what they're saying could be true, or probably is true, and you got to make sure you're not supposing what they're saying versus listening to what they're saying. Because if you are anticipating what their meaning is, you may totally lose the message.
Oh, that's great advice. And I think it's important too for grandfathers to take that step back, and if we're not good listeners, try to become better listeners, because I think as the kids are getting older and there's things at school, there's things at home, we're in a great opportunity and a great place to sit there and listen to them and hear what they're saying, because we love them. We want the best for them. And we're an outlet that's not mom and dad. That's right. That, they know that, we're not going to be judging them. We're not going to be dealing with the discipline side of things.
Right.
But we're there to help get them through something. We're there to listen to them and to understand them. And sometimes that means listening to them and going, your sister was a bit of a jerk. And I hear you. Or, hey, your brother shouldn't have, picked the lock on your door and gone in and gotten your stuff,
Right. But you have to also, there's the balance of, depending on what the topic is, making sure they're not trying to get an answer out of you that's different than what their parents would do. So it's a really fine line where and I tried, and I do. As I said earlier, I probably tried to counsel them more than I probably should. But I try to do it in a neutral fashion that is always geared back towards their parents and what their parents would do and stuff like that. But there could come a time when they want to talk to you and it's outside of their parents, and they just want to say something, and you just kind of work with it. And if they don't want you to, as long as it's nothing egregious, as long as they just want to tell you something, you go, got it, and work through it, and just leave it between you and them. And that's what a grandparent's for.
Yeah, no, I love that. Tabasco, I've had you on for a little while, and I've loved this conversation. Is there any advice that you would have for the new grandfathers? Like myself, that are coming through. We've talked a lot about the listening, the being there, being aware and focused on the events. But are there some other things that you would have for us as pieces of advice?
Yeah, and so for me, from my perspective, one, I have to always say, keep the parents in mind when you're doing stuff, right? You're not the parent, but yet the kids will come to you and almost kind of treat you like a parent. So, but you do want to be there for them. The second thing is, we're at a stage in our lives where we may have more time and money to entertain the kids. I find myself doing a lot of entertaining with them, taking them places, doing stuff. And that's good. My daughter doesn't mind you doing that, but I also try to be mindful of the parent. I'll give you an example. I wanted to take the boys to a baseball game, and we have minor league teams here in Raleigh. But I called my daughter and I said, "Is Leo, their dad, going to take them to a baseball game? If he's going to take them to a baseball game this year, I want him to be the first one to take them to a ball game. I have a lot of means and more time to do things with them, but I don't want to take the joy away from their mom or their dad of doing things with them." So I try to be conscious of that. I try to check with them, but I do a lot of things with these kids because I can. And my daughter allows me to, but I always try to make sure I'm not stepping on something that they want to do with the boys. So that's another piece of advice, that I can say, be careful with. And the third one is you're the person that will do the things that they want to do that nobody else may want to do with them. And that may be the case. Jackson loves to play street hockey in the middle of the summer when it's hotter than Hades, and he wants to go out there and play street hockey his way. And you may not want to do it, but you know what? It makes that little guy happy. Sometimes you have to say no, and I've done that. But sometimes, and if they want to go somewhere, like they love to go to these indoor amusement parks and all that, sometimes you need to say no. But then I find an alternative in order to, appease. But sometimes even around the house, they may ask you to do stuff. You don't really want to do it, but if that's what they want to do, you suck it up and you go have a good time.
That's great advice. And I like that too. And I don't know if the baseball game was their first baseball game or maybe the first of the year, but
first of the season. Yeah.
First of the season. Yeah. But it sprung to mind too, is being able to allow mom and dad to do those first with the kids.
Yep.
If mom and dad are able to take them to the first baseball game and it's the first time they walk into Yankee Stadium or
yep.
Citi Field or whatever it is, that's a magical moment for a kid when you come through the tunnel and come out to the bleachers and you see the stadium and everything. And for me, it just sparked a thing for me is being aware to let mom and dad have those firsts when they can.
Yep. Now, absolutely agree. Absolutely. And it may not seem to my daughter and my son-in-law that I do take that into consideration because I do so much with them. But I always try to involve them and make sure that they're a part of the solution the best I can. My son-in-law works in grocery stores. He works odd hours, weekends, and it's really tough for him to make everything. But I always try to make sure that he does have, and they have the first right of refusal.
Oh, that's great advice, and I appreciate that. So, Tabasco, anything else maybe we didn't cover that you would like to bring up?
No, I thought I really enjoyed the conversation. You pull it out of me pretty good, and you got me ranting and raving. So, no, I think I hope people listen to this. I'm one man's opinion, one man's experience. And as you know, from what you talked about with Ralph Jodis, he's got a whole different perspective and a different situation. So for anybody who is a new grandparent or grandfather, and I will tell you that the 10-year-old wanted to sit in and listen to our conversation as we were having it, but he had soccer practice tonight, so he wasn't able to make it. But he was really interested in how this conversation was going to go down.
Oh, that would have been fun to have him on this, but maybe we'll do something next time with him.
You got it. But if you ever want me back or have a different subject, you can tell I'm not short of words, so I'd be glad to support you in any way I can.
No, I appreciate it. And thank you so much for spending time with us this evening. I really do appreciate it.
Best to you, and good luck in your podcast.
Thanks.
Bye.
What another cool conversation we just had. Man, it was great to talk to Tabasco. I really enjoyed his insights on listening and being an active listener, being able to sit down and really dig into what's going on with whomever it is that you're having a conversation with. I also enjoyed his insights about being sure to let parents have those first moments with the kids. And of course, we talked about baseball as being the principal first, but there's all sorts of firsts, that parents and kids really should be the ones to share. And as grandparents and grandpas, I think sometimes we have to be aware of those situations and maybe pull back a little bit from doing a certain activity until those young ones have had a chance to do that activity with their father or their mother and have had that shared first experience with them. So do me a favor, go to my website or shoot me an email and let me know what you guys thought of this conversation. I sure would appreciate hearing from you, and I'll be sure to pass on any comments that you might have over to Tabasco. I'm sure he'd love to hear your comments and would also enjoy connecting with you if you want to. Until next time, remember to stay cool. Thank you for listening to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and share it with a friend. That's the best way you can help us to expand our community, as well as get the news out about how valuable grandpas are in the lives of those kids. If you'd like to leave me a comment or shoot me a potential topic for this podcast, please go to www.cool-grandpa.us. Look for the comments tab, fill it out, hit submit. It's as easy as that. Until next time, remember to stay cool.